24. This is SIG Node weekly meeting. Welcome everybody. We have 4 items on agenda. If you also have anything, please add it to agenda document, and we will start with Itamar.
Hello, Sergey. So I got 2 items here. The first is about adding swap to kubectl describe nodes output. So basically, we have received feedback from Jordan about exposing, from Don, to make it easier to monitor and debug swaps. So we've added to kubectl describe node. And on the other hand, Jordan was pushing back on it. And basically, this PR sits there for over a month now. And I just wondered what's the right balance here and how can we move forward?
Can you tell what the concern is? And maybe Don can comment on this.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
What's the main concern with adding it to kubectl describe? Is there any big problem with that?
I'm sorry, I probably got some.
Itamar, so can you summarize Jordan's pushback? So yeah, we can comment on that.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Marina. Basically, the pushback was that it's now part of the API as another resource name. So just like memory and CPU, swap is showing up there. I think the confusing part is that one cannot ask specifically currently for swap as opposed to CPU and memory on the pod spec, and therefore showing it under the kubectl describe nodes output is looks a bit confusing because it's a resource, it's out there, but you can't really ask for it in any way. Yeah, I guess that's the pushback as I understand it.
Don, you asked for that. Do you have any comments about it? Okay, I understand the long term we want to have ability to request swap, do we not? So long term it would make sense. It's just a point in time when it will be confusing for few releases for customers. Is it my correct understanding?
So yeah, this is actually under heavy discussions right now. I'm not sure if there will ever be a pod spec for explicitly requesting swap. It could be that it will, but yeah, we're not sure.
Yeah, so I think the thing here is whether something that is, I mean, if it's not directly requested as a number to capacity, does it make sense to expose it on the node or not? Is the question. Don, I saw John. Yeah, thoughts. We can't hear you, Don.
I can hear you, but not very well. Maybe it's my issue.
Right, maybe.
Well, Don reconnecting. Just my opinion, my 2 cents. Requesting swap or using the actual numbers or exact amount, I think it doesn't really make sense for modern applications. So it's more about to have a flag or something which says like this application can tolerate swap or this application should not use a swap at all per container basis. Regarding the node status, right now we don't have really good discovery, so showing what the node has swap or swap enabled might be good. I don't know, does it make sense to show it similar to like ephemeral storage amount of existing enabled swap or not. That's another story. I don't know. No strong opinion.
And also, it's important to mention that swap can still be monitored through summary API, through metrics. So yeah, but it's just a little bit more difficult. And yes, I agree. Requesting for explicit amounts of swap is either doesn't make sense or very, very hard to do. And this is why currently there are no APIs for it.
Yeah, I think we all agree that probably that will not happen. It'll always be a fraction or some other way that we can request it. And like as it is, it's hard for users to even specify CPU and memory. So I think Dawn commented, Itamar, that she's going to follow up with you and Jordan offline to at least conclude on the describe node situation.
Yeah, we also need to account for scenarios that I heard requested before. It's when swap is added when soft memory is reached on SIG v2. So when throttling starts, something or other, I don't know if it will be kubelet or its external agent, will add swap to the pod. So pod has some place to dump the active, not active pages. So this scenario will also be, I mean, for this scenario, it will be very useful to have status updated with the actual swap usage numbers.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. So yeah, I guess I should move to the next point there, which is the time of this meeting. So I'm from the EMEA region, and for me, the meeting starts at 8 p.m., which is very late. And I made a poll a few weeks ago regarding rescheduling the meeting to a bit earlier. And most of the people have agreed that, according to this poll, that moving it to 1 or 2 hours earlier would be possible. So yeah, just wanted to hear what your thoughts about that and how we can push this forward.
To make the decision, we really need a lot of information. So if you have an opinion, or you just want to keep it as is, or you want to move it, in any case, fill out the form so we know how much interest is there. We may end up with some compromise of iterating meeting times, but we need to know who is interested. Right now, there is very low participation in this poll.
Maybe we should discuss it offline to understand exactly like how to gather this data. Maybe it doesn't have to be a poll in Slack. Maybe we should promote the poll here in this talk, you know, so more people can answer. Or yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure exactly which data I should gather and from whom in order to really make it happen.
Yeah, we can definitely promote the poll widely. We can put it in the doc. Yeah, all the channels. So let's try to gather more data. And then
okay, so maybe I'll create a new poll that would be more expressive with more options in there. We'll promote it for a few weeks, and then maybe we can continue the conversation.
Yeah. Can you share that with me and Sergey before you send it out, and then?
Sure, will do.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next topic is, I assume it's Sally.
Hey, I'm Sally. I work at Red Hat, if that matters or is of interest to anyone. So I have been annoyed by this problem, and although I'm not going to pretend that I know the ins and outs of, you know, all of the implementation that would have to happen here, although I could figure it out. But I've been using AI models and model servers, and I just want to be able to simply mount the model file and have it shared with the model server container. And in order to do that, I have to include a shell. in my either init container or volume mount. And it seems, I've been asking around why this is so, because it just seems like I've been using OCI images as a way to just package and deliver files, more so than like running them for a while. And I think other people have too. So yeah, I just think that an OCI volume source type makes sense. And I tend to think it makes sense more in tree because it's like it just feels like a core thing that should be there. So I've opened this KEP to get a discussion going. I know that some people believe it should be a CSI plugin. Yeah. So I am planning on bringing a few people with me if this progresses to, like Peter Hunt, Sasha Grunner and Mike Brown. They've volunteered to sort of support me in this, but yeah, just gathering interest, opinions, and does anyone have any now?
So I'm definitely like supportive of this pattern, like irrespective of whether it ends up being in tree or a CSI driver. So happy to discuss this more. I think one thing while exploring OCI artifacts is, so right now we have a very good story around how images are managed on a node, because images are all homogeneous. They all have layers. We know that we create a root file system from them and we run processes from them. The challenge with artifacts is what happens with an artifact is very dependent on the type of the artifact and also on the consumer of the artifact. Examples, like there could be a WASM artifact, which is a runnable artifact. There's a seccomp profile artifact, which is just configuration or data, right? So there's data versus runnable. So that's one thing. One more thing to consider here is the life cycling of artifacts on a node. Like right now we have CRUD on a node that is managed by the kubelet and the container runtime together. We want to make sure that if we are pulling a model, we are not putting that same model again for each pod, right? We should have unique references on a node. So if the container runtime is involved, it's easier to do that. Versus if it happens in a CSI driver, I worry there could be duplication. So I think we can capture the pros and cons of those approaches. And I feel like if we target a wider set of use cases and use a standard like OCI, then it makes a more compelling case versus just saying, okay, it's just for this case. Maybe we find 3-4 different use cases, how it can be attached. There was a very early Kubernetes issue. I think Tim Hawken had opened. I'll dig a link which might have some other use cases early on, which was about basically mounting an image as a wall.
Cool. Anyone else have thing to
Sasha,
help?
you want to talk through your comment, Sasha?
Just a side note. So, in addition to Mronal, what you said, it's fine what we have images for like runnable artifact managed by runtime. But if we are starting to use OCI images as a data, we have indeed different life cycle, and it might be better to mount them in separate directory and with clear interface when to enable, disable, and so on. So the pattern of external CSI driver is a bit better, in my opinion.
Something that I think is worth mentioning as a sort of response to that is like something that we would get if we had it in tree is the kubelet would be aware of these artifacts in garbage collection. So like a potential pitfall is, you know, the kubelet could like see it as an image or something like that, and then, you know, qualify it for garbage collection, depending on how the CRI implementation returned the information about it. So if we taught the kubelet how to natively deal with it, then that wouldn't, you know, be an issue. But that is a bit implementation specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, everybody. I think you have to ask, why are these OCI? How is it advanced? Where are they coming from? These artifacts, these images. How do you log in? How do you pull them? What kinds of artifacts? Are we talking about manifests, indexes with a list of artifacts, right? Mapping. I like the mapping tool for volumes. I think you guys are right that in the case where you want this volume to be remountable at another pod at a later point in time, then it doesn't really make sense. I think your use case, Sally, was read only, so it's probably okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure. What if these are things that you're generating at runtime? Layers that are being added to an OCI image. There's a lot of use cases that we could drill into, Peter. I think it's interesting. It's a very interesting topic, and given that we just came up with the refers API to pull artifacts that are pointing to an OCI image, that makes this even more important. And we could also come up with a pattern where we push the pod itself to an OCI image repository, and have a list of artifacts that are going to be pulled down and shared across the all the containers in the pod. There's a lot of good stuff we can do here. We could just never really go anywhere because we keep talking about it. But I think we can come up with a short list of use cases and do some prototypes.
Yeah, so if there's a short list of use cases that a lot of people are seeing, then we could start there to narrow it down. Yeah.
I think one other note, like just quick thing, something that Sally had conceived of, and I think that is a relevant sort of note, is like the treating of the artifacts could be similar to the treating of config maps, where the lifecycle of the artifact is tied to the lifecycle of the pod. And that would sort of, if multiple pods are using the same artifact, then, it would survive for the duration of both of those pods lifecycle, which, since that pattern already exists, it could be pretty native to just, change the pattern, instead of being a config map object, be like an artifact, and be pulled through the CRI.
Makes a lot of sense, Peter. Just really, then you're saying OCI, the cry image service, is the source of that pod's volume. They'll work pretty well and make it easy without applying a lot of code.
Can you hear me now? Finally.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have to switch. So I like the direction. This one, it is separate, at least separate about the model and from the container itself. So using the OCI and remove of the whatever the runtime or shell script, all those kind of things from that image. That part actually I really like. The only concern I have is the represent on the node is as the image. So in the Kubernetes, we treat image, right? So the life cycle image might not meet of the model data life cycle requirement. But I still think about this is the better, because today existing customer, or tons of the people already include of their model into their container image, right? So that's this is at least from the one direction, in the right direction. But my concern it is just we are kind of piggyback about existing of the still is piggyback on existing image, and the life cycle of the image is today's is not satisfy these cases. So a lot of things might not meet. So, but this is good start. We can move forward from here. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think as an adjacent, we can think separate it out as an artifact versus an image. So that way there is clarity. Okay, image meant to be runnable. OCI artifact can either be runnable or can be used as a data source. And then we can have separate life cycles with it.
Are you suggesting we should limit this OCI, if this is an OCI volume source, to just artifact rather than images?
Yeah, do we have, unless we find a compelling reason where it wouldn't satisfy the model use case, is there a reason why models can't just be artifacts and really need to be wrapped in a an image.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think I just predate OCI artifacts, so I always just stick everything in an image, but I think it would work. Yeah. So something to think about, keeping it the artifact. Okay.
Right. Thanks, Sally.
Yeah, thanks.
Peter, you up?
I'm up. So this one was an issue opened by someone upstream that I initially pushed back a little bit on, but they have some pretty compelling points. I just wanted to broadcast them. It is an architectural conversation in like how the kubelet accounts for the effect, like how it counts the pod's logs towards its own ephemeral storage, while where the workload author is in part responsible for the, the amount of logs that the pod is reporting, but it's really the kubelet that's responsible for the amount that it can grow up to, because it's an admin that has to set the limits for the amount of like when the logs get rotated and stuff. And the argument is basically that, for pods like I can't remember what the example was, but ENS or something like that, like pods that are like infrastructure pods that need to be running, but an author might not have, like someone who's running the pod might have authority to like change. The core DNS is the one where it logs a lot by default. That pod is being charged the ephemeral storage limits defined by the kubelet rather than defined by the workload author. And so I'm having trouble sort of finding a compelling reason to argue against this. I think the pattern as it works today, like the kubelet being the one to sort of define the limits, and then the containers being beholden to that, I think like that's fine and like that works. But like I do understand the case of like, how ephemeral storage limits, by counting these logs, it's in part, it's like out of the workload author's control to be able, that they're not being limited, or that they're being limited by something that's ultimately decided by the kubelet. So I wanted to broadcast this and find other people's feelings on, I assume that we want to keep it this way. I mean, at least historically, but I don't have a good argument against it, basically.
Yeah, just know this. If we will decide to change this, we will need to invest into kube reserved on storage as well, and it will not be an easy task just to let's just stop accounting for the logs. It will be a major cap to write.
Yeah, and I'm not personally that sort of attached to championing this. It just, I was in the SIG Node CI meeting, I just decided to take on the conversation, and it's fallen out of my reach, basically, in terms of, being able to argue against it. So I'm not really that invested in it, but I just wanted to bring it up and see if anyone had anything to talk to this person, because it is a compelling case, I think.
One question is, do we have it documented?
It being like the sort of relationship between.
Yeah, the fact that we will account for those logs into ephemeral storage, and maybe even way how to check how much is utilized by ephemeral storage by logs. If we have these two, like detection and the fact that like documentation that we account for that, it may be a reasonable answer for now. If we don't have either, and it's just a magic on a side of end user, then it's a little bit, I mean, it's an easier improvement to do in this case, to just provide transparency here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is documentation. I think the person is really more saying like, I think that this is an anti-pattern. Like they're like claiming that it's like it shouldn't work this way rather than being confused, like being unsure it works this way. I mean, I could dig around to make sure, but I like the way that the conversation on the issue is going. It's more like, you know, this person is saying like, you know, I don't think that it should work this way. I think that that's like an anti-pattern. But if no one has really any sort of, you know, heavy opinions on it, then I'm fine dropping it or, you know, letting it languish until they bring it up.
Peter, I agree with you. I think we do have the document. Let me dig into the older doc. Tim also want to comment. Go ahead.
I apologize if this was already covered. I kind of tuned into this conversation a little late. But have we discussed the security implications of this?
Well, that's the first thing that I mentioned to the
Okay.
you know, reporter, and they were like, yes, I get the security case, but it's more like the kubelet is already enforcing the sort of limits by doing the log rotation itself. So like, why would that also count against the pod for ephemeral storage?
Yeah, I think we'd have to have a way of enforcing hard limits because I think the rotation is all soft limits right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that the qubit, by being only reactive with just its configuration, it can't fully protect in a way that ephemeral storage limits are supposed to. Though it is also ephemeral storage limits are currently enforced reactively as well, I think.
I want to
Okay,
comment on. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say I'll take a closer look at the issue and see if there's something to comment on there.
I wanted to comment on fact that it's anti-pattern and people complain that it's anti-pattern. I think it's anti-pattern because we have very little way to make it a pattern. Like we wanted to include probes into networking of a pod and account for probe execution time, like CPU utilization as a pod utilization. We just don't have a way to do it properly. If we could, like, I think we will do that. Because it will be much cleaner solution from our side, and like we wouldn't depend on the number of pods that much. So I think it's, I would argue that it's anti-pattern not because we want it to be an anti-pattern in other places, but we rather implement the same thing in other places as well.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point in that, like, I think as a SIG, our goal, a goal that we could have is like the cost of running a Kubernetes node is amortized based on like whatever the number of like pods. It's not linear with the number of pods as they grow. Like the cost could, like in a hypothetical ideal world, all of the costs of a pod would be charged to the pod C group and the pod's like limits and stuff. And the overhead of just keeping the node running would cost the same, would be constant between, you know, a whatever number of pods, so that the node can scale to any amount theoretically. And also like a bad pod can't affect other pods on the node because the cost is always charged against it. That's a good point. Even though we're not really close to that, we're still pretty linear in terms of like the, you know, cost on the node objects, the node processes for each pod. I think it could be a goal, a cool goal for us to state, like, we wish it to be constant. And then this sort of achieves that. Sorry.
So I think another angle here will be like investigating how PSI can get us a good signal around the IO pressure generated by containers in a pod, and if that's better versus like using numbers, specific numbers, right? We really care about the rate versus specific amount logged.
Yeah, totally. And that, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that I think PSI could allow us to be more flexible with the limits that a pod has, and like give, allow them to burst as long as everything on the node isn't bursting at once. Cool. Well, at the very least, I like, thanks for the discussion. The point that Sergey brought up, I think, is compelling, and I will bring it up, and anyone else is welcome to chime in on that issue, and we'll see, as for now, we can just keep it as is, which is the easiest course. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, next, what up?
Yeah, hi. Yeah. So this is the issue regarding the eviction manager, mentioning that the eviction manager should check the disk usage of the dead containers as well under the disk pressure. So I have updated the issue earlier as Kevin has asked some kubelet logs, etc. So I just wanted to know what the community thinks and what the community point of view regarding this issue, and how can we proceed to it. Yeah.
Could you summarize the issue, Vaibhav, for folks that
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So under the disk pressure, so when the disk pressure arises, so the eviction manager does not take account the disk usage of dead containers. So like if the pod having the dead container having more disk space, so it is not removed. Means the eviction manager checks only the disk space of the living container only. So the issue is about that it should check the disk usage of dead container also. Like if there is a pod having a dead container and is using more disk space, should be evicted first rather than the dead container having the less disk space.
My understanding it do check off the dead container, but I haven't looked at the detail yet. You either maybe it's just because when there's the disk pressure and maybe there's the many cleaning up the disk actually take time. So it's not like you kill something or you remove something immediately the disk freed, right? So it's just in process. My understanding there's the in process asynchronous loop to clean all those dead container. But another thing it is also maybe those not really dead container. I think you maybe think about is purely dead pod we need to remove because container might die. Then they have some like the logging left, and but there are also container may be restarted, right? So I'm not sure which one. So this is kind of a different policy, and the parallel is going on. Like if it's dead container, but it's supposed should be restart, and there's the clean up of the policy. But if it is disk pressure. And the most effective it is just kill one of the running container, make sure that's not generate more. So that's kind of things I think there's the logical, but they definitely know that cleaning up the dead pod or delete pod first. There might be have the bug, but that's the policy.
Okay. So
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the issue is that eviction manager just doesn't count this ephemeral storage for dead containers. And if we will fix the counting, then maybe we don't need to change anything else. Is it the issue?
can you repeat? Sorry.
So I believe the issue is that we just don't count this ephemeral storage for dead containers. So the issue is not that we behave differently and like don't clean it up fast enough, but that we don't account in it when we calculate which to evict. Is it the issue?
Yeah. We don't account the disk storage. Yeah.
I think it's the issue is easier than changing how fast we garbage collect or anything. It just, I mean, I don't know how much easier. I haven't looked in the code, but I think the issue is just change accounting, and it feels like a bug more than a cap. I mean, it may be a cap because it may break something.
Yes, so I have created a cap also. That is, I think, closed due to no activity. Uh, the link is the below of the cap.
I think PipeUp, the issue is that we don't have active maintainers who can help you drive it forward. That's the biggest problem. It's not like we don't care. It's more of a bandwidth issue. So yeah, it just requires more work from you to help us understand better like how complex is the fix, and maybe like if you can suggest a fix and show that it's simple enough, then it will be easier for us to find somebody to review and approve this in upcoming releases.
Okay, as I have also not that much experience in the code, but yeah, I will try to find out something if there is some more use case or from use case. So yeah, okay.
And you can also use distribution list, like send an email saying you're looking for anybody partner up with you to look at this. As I said, it's just reality of bandwidth of maintainers and reviewers. Thank
Okay,
you.
okay,
Thank you for
sure,
bringing it up.
I understand. Yeah.
I'm interested in the use. I am interested in the use case, but it's a little tricky to say. Okay, we're gonna kill the pod and hit proc, and then expect the evictions from kubelet to happen in the right order. I think we need to understand the use case a little bit more.
No, Mike, it's about containers that finished. So imagine you have a job and container finished. You still
Yeah.
have logs laying around.
Right. So
Or maybe it crashed and restarted.
Yeah. Right. What is the expectation? Kubelet should handle that on the exit event.
No, Kubernetes just need to account for logs that were written by that containers. If it will account for them and count like this pod consuming this much ephemeral storage and this much this ephemeral storage, then it will decide better which one to kill.
At least logs, but potentially other files that may be held.
Wait a minute. If the dead container, we also need to return the last failure logs, right? So you still need so it's not that simple. Say okay, go get rid of, because until that pod it is removed, you need at least to keep last failure logs. So I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely. We just need to account for it when we decide which one to evict.
So I'm not sure that's the problem. It is we didn't account, and because sounds like I'm not sure here, right? And we need to look at more, right? So this is in these cases, if we account, actually you are running to off the disk pressure even earlier, right? Like from the high level hypothesis. So you still need evicted, but maybe evicted, like the remove of those repeated of logs of the running failure, like have the crash loop. But you might still need to leave a lot of last failure container logs there until that pod completely removed. So it's not simply just remove those logs and they're logical. We carefully keep those kind of things there. So otherwise, how you debug, how to know those kind of things, right? So that's kind of the things I just want to make sure it's not simple. We just
Yeah, I think in getting maybe like we can't just remove the log entirely. We'll have to retain the last few lines. I think there's a code path for termination log which gets like last 10 or 30 lines. So later on, if there's a crash loop or something, someone can debug, because we have a flag, right? Retain so many instances of terminated pods. So that also needs to be taken into account. I agree. So the cleanup isn't as simple as just removing it, because we break that functionality then.
Yeah, I just want to know that if you look at bug description, pod is still alive and it will keep going. There was a restarted container in the pod that somehow accounted for like large size of like large chunk of ephemeral storage. And the issue is that when we calculate eviction score for container with no restarted pod and for container with restarted pod, we will change one without restarted pod because we don't account for restarted pod. So we'll evict something that consumes less ephemeral storage than more ephemeral storage.
So the old instance is kept because I think we have a policy of retaining one previous instance, right? So so we can't just remove it. We'll have to retain some information about it, like from 5 GB maybe.
The suggestion is not to remove it, Mrinal.
Right,
The suggestion is to, when you calculate the score, which pod to remove, to evict, you account for all the ephemeral storage, including dead containers. If you didn't account, like today's situation is absurd when you have dead containers with ephemeral storage that is locked down on them. You don't account for this, and you will remove container with less ephemeral storage usage than more ephemeral storage usage. Just because that one has like a restarted container at some point.
No, I'm thinking like maybe like when something dies, should we truncate the log? I understand the issue, yes, this calculation, but I'm thinking like, should we just truncate the log to last few lines rather than retaining gigabytes of logs of a dead container? So there is a fixed max amount of space usage per dead container.
If you can comment on whether it's just logs or anything else, can you make a comment about it?
Vaibhav, do you know if it's just logs or there are cases where some other area is also unaccounted for?
No, not only logs. If means if the dead container is having a file also, like something, then also it is not accounted. Means the whole disk space for the dead container is not accounted, not only the logs.
The ephemeral layer of the root file system.
Sorry, that much.
Well, I guess you have to check if someone remembers off the top, like at this point, whether remove container is already called and whether the container runtime has unmounted the overlay FS or not. That will dictate whether, like, if the container wrote something on the top of the root file system, those files are still around or not.
So I think action items here, my help is bring like write down more details, and if you get to the point when you have a fix suggested, then it will be way easier to decide who will review it and who will approve it. If you want to find a body, also use Slack and mailing lists. It's also good ways to find somebody to help you.
So Itamar offered to look into this, so you can pair up with them.
Okay.
Thanks so
sure.
much.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I think with that, we at the end of our agenda. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? And have a great rest of your day, everybody. Bye.
Bye, thank you.